Whenever.
Yes.
Alright, so my name's Kevin. Today I'm going to be talking about the effects of video games, and particularly the negative effects. Now, keep in mind that I'm discussing a certain issue. I don't want you guys to get like offended or like, have like, never mind. Alright. So the reason I picked this topic is because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think it's a prevalent discussion. It's not a heated debate, but it's definitely an issue that's out there. My major claim is that an increase in interactivity in video games contributes to the overall negative behavior in young people. Now, what I mean by increased interactivity, I mean games this day and age with the in-depth reward system. I'm not talking about the back then, Tetris, Pac-Man, those kind of games. I'm talking about games that there's an objective other than just winning. My secondary claims. Alright, so my first secondary claim is that the reward system is the key component in stimulation of harmful behavior, addiction, etc. My second one, certain harmful behaviors have been accounted for, like addiction, violent tendencies. My third one is that young people are more vulnerable to these disorders. Alright, so the first secondary claim. So I'm saying that interactivity is a key component in stimulation of harmful behavior. So the reward system is what drives the addiction. Now I have a testimony by David S. Bickman, PhD. I consider him an authority because he's had several years experience working with children, and he's actually been working with research. So while the large body of research on violent television and film provide a solid foundation for our understanding of the effects of violent video games, there are reasons to believe that the influence of violent video games are stronger than other forms of screen violence. So what I mean by that, or what he means by that, is that video games are interactive. It's not like it's not passive like you would see on the media or the television. Another example is an article on video game addiction. Alright, so the lure of a fantasy world, especially pertaining to online role-playing games. These are games in which a player assumes the role of a fictional character and interacts with other players in a virtual world. So my second secondary claim, certain harmful behaviors which have been accounted for, addiction, violent tendencies, which, by the way, addiction is not recognized by the medical association or whatever the doctors belong to, whatever association, but it's still an issue that's out there. The first, I'm not saying that it's a causation of it, but there's definitely a correlation between it. So especially within the younger age group. So right here was a statistic, and basically showed an addicted group and a regular group, and it was I think it was 607 8th and 9th graders, and which the statistic showed was that the addicted group revealed more reports of involvement in physical fights in the last year, more arguments with friends and teachers, higher hostile attribution scores, and lower grades. Now, these results suggest that video game addiction is a problem with among adolescents, particularly among young males. So I'll get into the testimony again. Strong, consistent relationships exist between viewing violent media and increased levels of anxiety, desensitization, and aggressive thoughts and behaviors among young people. Alright, so scientists have exposed children to violent media in laboratories and found that they behave more aggressively than children who saw nonviolent television or played nonviolent video games. Using survey studies, scientists have found that even after controlling the dozens for complex characteristics linked to aggression, watching violent television and playing violent video games still increases the likelihood that the child will be violent. So I was talking about violence. Now I'm going to go into addiction. So research suggests gambling elevates dopamine. Young says, and gaming is in the same category, but there's more to addiction than brain chemistry. So when they mean by dopamine, anything that stimulates pleasure in the brain. Different activities have that effect. Sex, food, certain activities, like cocaine, releases enormous amounts of dopamine. However, it's not just having to do with the brain chemistry, it also has to do with psychological components to it. So if there's underlying psychological problems within the child, they're more likely to feel the effects. So my last point is that young people are more vulnerable to these disorders. Pretty easy to understand why. Get into this. Children's susceptibility to the effects of media violence varies with their age. Children younger than 8 are more vulnerable to media violence effects because they have not yet developed the ability to discriminate fully between fantasy and reality in media content. Research has consistently shown that children often behave more aggressively than older children do after playing video games. That basically concludes my speech. I just want to make note that, this is just, I'm making a correlation between this. It's not a causation like saying video games cause this, but there's an indirect link, and that's pretty much it.
What was it? Let me see. You wait here for a second.
No, hang on a second.
Yeah, fine.
All right, Kevin, you do an okay job setting up what the topic is. You make it clear what your claim is, but you start apologizing about that claim. And I know that you're trying to put a qualifier in here suggesting that you're not arguing causation, but you are making an argument. Otherwise, you're just describing what the research says. You have to tell us what inference you want us to draw from the inference. And it seems to me that the inference that you're drawing is that video games have an impact on how people react to violence in society. Whether it causes violence, that doesn't seem to be the point that you're making, but it certainly affects the way they perceive it. It might make them more likely to engage in it, and that there are some people who might be more susceptible as a consequence. Those seem to be inferences that I think your information would support, and I think you need stronger declarative secondary claims to make those points. You did a good job previewing what the content of the speech was at the beginning of the speech, and I thought you did a pretty good job signposting the first and the third points especially. On the second point, you're a little bit vague about what the claim is, and it sounds like you have multiple points within that claim, and you're wandering around a little bit, so you need to have more control over the structure of the argument in that particular section of the speech. I think you've got a lot of research in the presentation. Sometimes you're just giving us a little bit of information from that research. Frequently, it was kind of strange. You did a good job at the beginning trying to qualify one source, and then that was the only one that you seemed to be making any effort on. All of the other sources, sometimes all they got was a single word. We didn't get their first or last name. We didn't get any qualifications. I have this one quote that says, "Young said," and I'm going, okay, now, who is Young? How do they know this? What's their authority? And it's a piece of opinion evidence, so we need to have some of that information. I think that that's a consistent problem with the information after that first quote that you use, that most of the points that you present feel like I'm getting a footnote version of the quote instead of a complete quote, and the sources are often not cited as clearly as they need to be. The presentation, you need to be looking at the audience a little bit more. I think you're looking for your next piece of information, and it looks like you're going back and forth between the pages while you're speaking to us. Probably a couple more rehearsals would help. The time is, you're over time a couple of minutes. It's not a huge deal today, but we do want you to try and remember that you're going to need to keep in the time limits, especially when the debates come up, because we will be cutting people off when that happens. I think it's pretty clear you need a little practice because you had trouble with some of the key terms in the presentation. Desensitizing, desensitivity, I'm not exactly sure which version of the word that you're using there, but you had difficulty getting through it. And like I said, at the end of the speech, it seems like you're qualifying your claims so much that you're trying to even avoid having an argument and making an inference, and that's the whole point of the argument. All right, I do want to mention one more time that your electronic devices need to be put away. Even though they're not making any sound, they might be very distracting to people sitting around you. All right, now, a couple of you came in late and were asking about this. This is the evaluation form that you're supposed to turn in to me on the day that you speak when you give me your outline. I've just updated the version so you're not turning in the printed version. So don't fill this out on somebody else's speech. Is there anybody who didn't get one of these? There are two people, so. Could you pass those over there? Did you need? Oh no, you've got one right there. Thank you. She was sitting right there. That was easy enough. All right. Anna Marie is going to be our next speaker, and if you have her outline, this is the person that you were supposed to respond to. You're scheduled to speak today?
Yeah.
Hang on a second. I'll collect this in a minute. There are things there that I need to get from you that